The wind screamed against the small cabin, shaking the walls like an angry beast. Snow swirled outside, wild and cold, like the world wanted to swallow everything in sight. Inside, the fire struggled to stay alive, giving only a little warmth to chase away the winter chill. Laura May stood near the frosted window, staring out at the storm. At only 18, she already knew too much about loss. She remembered sunshine, laughter, her mother's soft hands, her father's strong voice. But all of that disappeared when fever took them 3 years ago. Now, the winter outside looked like her life inside this cabin, cold and cruel. "Get away from that window, girl. You're letting in the cold." Uncle Jeremiah's sharp voice cut into her thoughts. He sat at the table with another man, a stranger. A large figure with wide shoulders and a heavy coat covered in snow. His hat cast a shadow over his face, but Laura saw his eyes, blue like frozen water, hard, empty. "Yes, uncle," she said, stepping away from the window and hugging her thin shawl around her shoulders. Her uncle ignored her and kept talking to the stranger. "She's a good girl," he said, tapping the table with dirty fingers. "Works hard, never causes trouble, pure, still untouched by any man." Laura's cheeks burned with shame. They were talking about her like she was livestock, like a horse, like a cow, something to sell. The stranger finally spoke. His voice was deep and rough. "Pure or not, I need someone who can keep my home in order. The children need a woman. They miss their mama." "Children?" Laura's heart began beating faster. He had children. "That's why I'm offering a fair deal," Uncle Jeremiah said, sliding a piece of paper across the rough wooden table. "Her cattle. All 20 head left by my brother. And the old mare. In return, she becomes your wife." Wife! The word echoed in Laura's mind like a gunshot. Her cattle, her inheritance, the only thing her parents left her. Gone. Sold without her choice. The stranger looked at her then. Really looked. He studied her tired eyes, the calluses on her hands, the stubborn way she stood, as if she refused to break, no matter how life tried. "Can you speak for yourself?" he asked suddenly. Uncle Jeremiah frowned. "No need for." "I asked her," the stranger said again, quieter but more powerful. The room froze. Laura lifted her chin. "I can speak, I can read and write. I can hunt and cook what I hunt. I can sew, clean, and I don't complain." Her voice shook, but she forced herself to continue. "But my wishes don't seem to matter here." Something flashed in the stranger's eyes, a flicker of respect, maybe surprise. Uncle Jeremiah slammed his hand on the table. "Mind that tongue, girl!" But the pen was already in the stranger's hand. One quick scratch of ink, one signature. That was it. Her life belonged to him now. "Pack your things," the man said, rising to his full height. "We leave within the hour. The storm's getting worse." Laura felt trapped, a bird shoved from one cage into another. She turned toward the ladder leading to her small loft room, but her uncle's voice stopped her. "Remember," he said with a cruel grin. "A wife obeys. You're his property now. Bought and paid for. Don't forget that." Laura bit her lip so hard it tasted like blood, but she did not cry. She would not give them that. In her tiny loft, she packed everything she owned into a single carpet bag. 2 dresses, her mother's Bible, her grandmother's silver hairbrush, and a small pouch of seeds. All that was left of her family. Downstairs, her uncle and the stranger talked of money and cattle like nothing else existed. Like the girl upstairs had no heart, no dreams, no right to have a say in her own future. Outside, the snow kept falling. Harder, faster. When she came down with her bag, the stranger stood waiting by the door. "That all?" he asked. "Yes," she whispered. Her uncle didn't look at her, didn't say goodbye, didn't care. Laura stepped outside, and the bitter cold wrapped around her like a punishment. The stranger helped her into the wagon, his hand surprisingly gentle for a man who looked like he was carved from rock. "You can ride?" he asked. "Yes." "Good. You might need to. It's a long way to the ranch." "Ranch, children, widow, husband, husband. As the horses pulled the wagon into the storm, Laura looked back once at the cabin. No one stood at the window. No one watched her go. She wrapped the thick wool blanket around herself and stared into the white blur ahead. Fear settled in her chest like a stone. Who was this man? What kind of father? What kind of husband? What kind of life waited for her on that ranch? The cold wind whipped her face, but she lifted her chin anyway. Survival. That was all she had left. She would not break. Not today, not ever. And yet, a single question haunted her through the storm. What kind of fate had she just been sold into? The storm chased them across the Wyoming hills until the horses could go no farther. The stranger slowed the wagon near a small shack standing strong against the snow. A lantern flickered through the window, lighting their way through the white darkness. "We'll shelter here tonight," he said. He helped Laura down, his grip firm but careful. She followed him inside, stepping into a one-room shelter with a stove, a single narrow bed, and shelves lined with dusty cans. It was warmer than the wagon, but only just. "You start a fire, I'll see to the horses." Without waiting for her reply, he turned and stepped back into the storm. Laura moved quickly. She found matches, stacked wood, and soon a fire crackled in the stove. Warmth crawled into her shaking hands. Her fear did not ease, but at least she could feel her fingers again. When the stranger returned, snow clung to his coat and hat. He hung them by the fire and glanced at her work. "You know what you're doing," he said. "I've had to." She kept her eyes down. Being alone in a small room with a man she barely knew made her stomach twist. He set 2 tin plates on the table, beans and cold biscuits. Simple food, but her hunger didn't care. As they ate, silence filled the room. Heavy, awkward. She didn't know if she should talk or stay quiet. Her uncle always punished questions and opinions. Finally, the stranger spoke. "I suppose I should tell you my name." "Clayton Ward." She nodded slowly. "Laura May." "I know." He looked at her straight on. "Your uncle said you're 18? "Yes." Quote, "He also said you know children. You raised your sister's baby." "That was a lie," Laura answered truthfully. "I don't know much about children." Clayton didn't react with anger. He only nodded once. "I figured some of what he said wasn't the truth." Laura waited for the harsh response, the disappointment. But he only took a slow breath, tired and deep. "My wife died 2 winters ago," he said. "Fever, too fast to understand. Left me with 3 young ones to raise and a ranch that can't run itself." A shadow crossed his eyes, the same kind she'd seen in people who lost someone they loved. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. He stared into the fire. "Eli is 6, Micah is 8. Little Rosie just turned 3. They—" His voice caught. "They need someone." "And so I what?" she said before she could stop herself. Clayton's head snapped up. "No." He set his jaw, like he was fighting something inside. "I didn't buy you," he said firmly. "You traded cattle for me," Laura whispered. "That makes me property." Clayton looked like her words punched him. His hand tightened on his coffee cup. "I won't touch you," he said, voice rough. "Not until you want that. If you ever do—" Laura blinked in shock. "You'll have your own room," he continued. "This is a business arrangement. You help with the children and I give you a home. Safety, respect." Safety, a home. Things she hadn't felt in years. That should have comforted her. Instead, confusion stirred in her heart. "I'm not asking anything more," Clayton added. "Can you accept that?" Laura swallowed. "Yes." He nodded, relief flickering in his eyes before he looked away again. The fire burned lower as night settled around them. Clayton unrolled a bedroll near the stove. "You take the bed," he said. "No, I can sleep here." It wasn't a question. His tone left no room for argument. Laura climbed into the narrow bed, pulling the blanket up to her chin. It smelled of dust and pine. Clayton laid down on the floor, turning his back for her comfort. She could hear his slow breathing, steady and strong. She stared at the dark ceiling. Her life had changed in one night. Sold, taken away, now lying in a strange place beside a man she barely knew. But despite the fear swirling inside her like the storm outside, She didn't feel alone. Morning came with a weak light pushing through the frost-covered window. They rode again through snow-covered hills. Hours passed in silence until the land opened into a wide valley. "That's my place," Clayton said. The Ward Ranch stretched across the land like something out of a dream. Barns, corrals, cattle moving in the distance, and a house larger than she expected. Smoke curled from the chimney. Home for him. Maybe someday for her? As they approached, 3 small figures watched from the porch. Children. His children. The oldest boy stared at her with hard suspicion. The middle one looked curious. The little girl held a doll tight to her chest. Clayton stopped the wagon and stepped down. "Boys," he called, "help with the bags." Micah, the oldest, crossed his arms. "She ain't our mama." The words hit Laura like cold wind. "No," Clayton agreed. "She's here to help. You treat her with respect." Quote. Rosie peeked from behind her brothers. "Are you going to leave us too?" she asked in a trembling voice. Clayton crouched and touched her cheek. "No more leaving. Mama Laura is here to stay." "Mama!" The name shocked Laura. It wasn't true. Not yet. But Rosie looked at her like she wanted it to be. "It's nice to meet you, Rosie," Laura said gently. Rosie stared at her, unsure, then stepped closer. That tiny step felt like a fragile beginning. Clayton motioned toward the door. "Come inside. You'll want to see your room." Laura followed, her heart pounding. This house felt stiff and silent, like laughter once lived here, but left after the mother died. In the kitchen, Rosie tugged her sleeve. "Can you make flapjacks?" the little girl asked softly. "Papa burns them." Laura managed a small smile. "I can try." Rosie nodded like that was the greatest hope she'd ever been given. Later, Clayton showed her the room at the far end of the hallway. "You can settle in," he said. "Dinner's at 6. He hesitated at the door. "We'll do right by each other," he said quietly. "Best we can." Quote. Laura nodded, but her heart raced. Could this really be a new start? A chance to belong somewhere? As Clayton walked away, the house fell silent again. Too silent. This family was hurting, broken, and somehow she was expected to fix it. Laura set her bag down and took a deep breath. She wouldn't cry. She had survived worse. But standing in that quiet room, one thought echoed inside her like thunder. How can a girl who never had love learn to give it to strangers? The first days on the ranch felt like walking through a place full of ghosts. The walls held memories she could not see. Every chair and picture seemed to whisper the name of the woman who once lived there. The children spoke of her often. Micah said nothing but watched her with anger in his eyes, as if she was trying to steal someone she could never replace. Eli wanted to smile, but fear kept his mouth straight. Only Rosie reached for Laura without doubt, clinging to her like hope. Laura worked from sunrise to late night. She cooked meals she hoped they would like. She cleaned rooms that seemed untouched since the mother died. She tried her best, but silence followed her like a shadow everywhere she went. One evening, while cooking supper, she heard crying outside. A child's cry. She rushed to the porch and saw Rosie sitting in the snow, holding her doll with shaking hands. Her tiny dress was wet and she looked scared. "Rosie, come here," Laura said softly as she ran to her. Rosie looked up with tears running down her cheeks. "Micah said Mama would be mad if I let my doll get dirty." Laura knelt beside her and wiped the tears away with gentle fingers. "Mama would be happy just seeing you smile." Rosie stared at her as if hearing something she never knew before. Then she leaned forward and hugged Laura tight around the neck. Laura held her close, feeling a warm ache inside her chest. Inside, supper was ready, but the house felt tense. Micah sat at the table, arms crossed, eyes cold. "You're trying to take my mama's place," he said suddenly. Clayton stood from his chair. "Enough." But Laura shook her head. "He can speak. He has every right." Quote. She knelt beside Micah's chair. "I am not trying to take her place. I could never be her. She was your mother. She will always be your mother." Micah's eyes filled with tears he tried to hide. "Then why are you here?" Laura took a slow breath. "Because you need someone to care for you. I can do that." If you let me." He looked down, shoulders shaking. Then he ran from the table and disappeared to his room. Clayton moved to follow, but Laura gently stopped him. "He needs time," she said. Clayton stared at her, his eyes softer than she had ever seen. "You're stronger than you look." Strong. She had never been called that before. The days passed, and slowly, little things began to change. Eli started asking her for help with chores. He laughed once or twice. Rosie drew pictures of their family, and she started adding Laura. Micah still kept his distance, but at night she saw his door crack open just enough for him to listen as she read bedtime stories to Rosie. One night, after the children were asleep, Laura stepped outside for air. The stars were bright over the ranch. Clayton came out quietly and stood beside her. "You're good for them," he said. She looked down at her hands. "I don't know if I'm enough." "You are," he said without hesitation. "They're smiling again because of you." His voice was low, close. She felt the air grow heavier around them. "You deserve more than the life you were given," he added. "I know your uncle didn't treat you right." Laura looked at him with surprise. "How do you know?" Clayton's jaw tightened. "A girl doesn't flinch from kindness unless she's used to cruelty." Her chest tightened at his words. She didn't know what to say. "You're safe here," he said firmly. "With us." For the first time in years, she believed someone when they said those words. Winter slowly loosened its grip. Snow melted from the hills. Calves were born on the ranch. Life moved forward. The children grew warmer each day. Micah even thanked her once after she fixed his torn shirt. Not a big smile, but not anger anymore. Then one evening, thunder rolled in the distance and heavy clouds swallowed the sky. Clayton rushed outside. The cattle spooked in the storm and broke through a fence. He saddled his horse fast. "I have to bring them in before lightning scatters them farther," he said, rain splashing his hat and coat. Micah ran out onto the porch. "Papa, let me help." "No," Clayton said sharply. "Stay inside." Laura grabbed his arm. "Please be careful." He met her eyes with something deep and full of meaning. "I'll come back." Lightning cracked across the sky as he rode away. Hours passed. The storm howled. The children waited near the window, fear growing thicker by the minute. When the door finally burst open, Clayton stumbled inside, soaked and muddy. His leg was bleeding from a fall, but he carried Rosie's favorite calf in his arms. The children rushed to him. Laura ran too, her heart racing. She helped him into a chair. He looked up at her with